Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fair Game. I'm your host, Jaimas, and we are now on episode 4 of our Megaman Soccer playthrough, about to take on Elecman. Elecman happens to be KJ Inafune's favorite robot master in the entire series. I'm like 90% certain that it's also Neil's favorite. And to be fair, in Megaman Soccer, there's a lot to like. Of the 8 initial starting robot masters, he is by far the fastest and has one of the best super shots in the entire game. Most of the super shots will stun a player for about 4 seconds on the main clock. A few will do so for a little longer or a little shorter, with the longest being Bubble Man's at around 6 seconds. Elecman's is about 5 seconds. Note that that's according to the in-game timer, not according to actual seconds. If you're talking actual seconds, it's closer to around 8 to 12. The downside is that Elecman is woefully substandard at pretty much everything else. While his kick strength is alright, his defense is bad, so he's comparatively easy to steal from, and his tackling power isn't very high, so despite his high speed, he has difficulty stealing from tougher robot masters. The good news is that if you're playing Elecman correctly, slower robot masters aren't ever going to get to the position where they can tackle you in the first place. Elecman also has one of the only industrial stages in the game, with the other one not being until the end of the game at Wily's Castle. Recently I booted up the Megaman HD collection, and I realized that Elecman's actually responsible for quite a few firsts in the Megaman series. For one, I have no idea how Capcom avoided getting sued by Journey for his stage music, because it openly rips off Faithfully. He also had the first vertically scrolling stage in the entire series, and his stage was also the first one that gave you an item that wasn't a weapon, namely the Magnet Beam. He gives you arguably the best weapon in Mega Man 1, with only 2 other weapons really giving any meaningful competition in that regard. And of the initial 6 Robot Masters of Mega Man 1, he is arguably the hardest. There is a credible argument to be made that this is the case for Mega Man Soccer as well. His sheer speed lets him get pretty much anywhere very quickly, and he can outrun basically any other Robot Master of the initial 8. Woodman, in particular, has an enormous amount of trouble with the guy, as does Pharaoh Man. Paradoxically, however, Elecman is also vulnerable to Woodman's shot. Idly, if you ever want the easiest possible time going through Mega Man Soccer, make sure you beat Elecman first. He can easily outrun 4 of the Robot Masters, which will make shooting at the goal much easier. He also makes taking on the next 2 fastest, Cutman and Fireman, also significantly easier. In other news, a friend of mine recently brought to me some really interesting information regarding Mega Man Soccer and its development history. It was released at the time sort of as a promo for the 1994 World Cup. That's why its development cycle was so incredibly fast and also incredibly cheap. They absolutely, without exception, had to get the game out ASAP for the event, and they succeeded with the game releasing roughly 3 months before the 1994 World Cup. The original design concept for Mega Man Soccer actually involved including every single Robot Master from the first 4 games. If you go looking for it, there's a prototype of the cover art that later showed up on the game's box and manual that actually shows Gutsman on it. It was changed to Proto Man being there in the actual launch version. So because the game was rushed to meet the 1994 World Cup, that's why it has so many problems. That's why basically everything was cut. Humorously, that ties it in even more with Nintendo World Cup, which I brought up earlier. Nintendo World Cup was released in 1990, a month before the 1990 World Cup. The difference is, Nintendo World Cup had almost 8 months worth of development going in. Contrastingly, Mega Man Soccer had a ridiculously short development time, a little over 5 months. All in all, given that, it makes Mega Man Soccer a lot more impressive than I originally thought it was. I don't think there's a single developer at the time other than Capcom that had the ability to get a game out that quickly. And while Mega Man Soccer certainly has its problems, of which there are many, the game at least works and is actually quite enjoyable, so props to him for it. One thing I do particularly like about the Elecman stage is its breakneck pacing. Because of how fast Elecman is, you constantly have to pass, you constantly have to shoot, and you constantly have to move things downfield. You can't rely on dribbling, even with the fastest of characters, just because Elecman is that goddamn fast. Both Woodman and Pharaoh Man are actually an interesting workaround for this particular problem. While both of them are very slow, they have the advantage of having such high defense that it will usually take Elecman at least 2 slides to steal the ball from one of them. Meanwhile, Dustman, Woodman, and Pharaoh Man all can easily steal from Elecman pretty much 100% of the time on one slide. Even Megaman, Bubbleman, and Skullman stand a pretty good job of stealing the ball from him. In Championship mode, the absolute best at countering Elecman is, ironically enough, Cutman. In addition to being almost as fast, Cutman has a high enough tackle stat that he can basically steal from Elecman 100% of the time. On top of this, Elecman is particularly vulnerable to Cutman's super shot. A close second to this would be Fireman. Fireman is almost as fast, and while he isn't quite as good at tackling, he has higher defense, so he can avoid having the ball stolen sometimes. Regardless of who you're deciding to use, however, you absolutely want to use frequent passing as opposed to dribbling to get the ball up the field. Elecman is, simply put, too fast to be outrun with who you have available. Unfortunately, this is something that's going to repeat itself 3 more times over the course of the championship. Actually, that does bring up one of my biggest problems with championship mode in this game. Aside from having almost no discernibly obvious Robot Master order, aside from going for which ones are vulnerable to what, in which case you can still do them in almost any order, the representation by game for the Robot Masters in the championship mode is just bad. Mega Man Soccer's championship mode gives you 3 Robot Masters from Mega Man 1, 3 from Mega Man 4, 1 from Mega Man 2, and 1 from Mega Man 3. And while in terms of player capabilities, it's not a bad loadout at all, there are so many better ones they could have gone with. Personally, I would have kept Elecman, Cutman, Pharaohman, Woodman, and Dustman. Needleman I would have replaced with Airman. Airman's slightly faster and slightly weaker statistically, but has a much better super shot. Skullman would have been replaced by Snakeman, who's slightly better stat-wise, even though he has a worse super shot, which actually would have made him an interesting side grade for Mega Man as opposed to a complete clone like Skullman is. Fireman I probably would have replaced with Gemini Man. Now, Gemini Man's kind of a contentious choice because even though he's way faster than pretty much everyone else you can get at that point, he's also not that good. He's very similar to Elecman, extremely fast, and that's all he has. The thing is, that is literally all he has because Gemini's super shot is kind of terrible. However, it is one of the only ones that Wily can't stop. Wink wink. Key to making this work, of course, would be tweaking Mega Man's resistance chart so that he no longer can automatically stop the Snake shot or Gemini shot, but give him 2 other ones he can resist in exchange. There are a number of major benefits to doing this. For one, it incorporates a really obvious weakness order. Cutman to Elecman, Elecman to Dustman, Dustman to Snakeman, Snakeman to Gemini Man, Gemini Man to Pharaohman, Pharaohman to Woodman, Woodman to Airman, and Airman to Cutman. The second major thing this fixes is what happens immediately after the 8 Robot Masters. You have 2 sub-bosses that you have to take on before Wily. Both of these are faster than everyone you currently have. With Gemini Man, that's no longer the case. Gemini Man's 48 speed allows him to outrun both Anchor and Proto Man, who are the next 2 stage bosses. It also gives you the benefit of a much more varied super shot pool. The currently available championship team offers 2 shots that light things on fire, 2 shots that tear things apart, and 2 shots that wrap things in a shield on impact. The new loadout gives you a bunch of super shots which all have different effects. Even the 2 closest ones in effect, the Gemini shot and the Snake shot, are different enough that it's pretty obvious how they work. Actually, that might be a project I put into effect later on. Crack open the game code a bit, alter the stats for the various Robot Masters, and hammer out what their weaknesses are. Imagine a version of Mega Man Soccer with no clones. Like, instead of Mega Man, Bomb Man, Skull Man, and Bubble Man being all the same, they all have different stats. I think it's very telling that this game has been out for almost 25 years now, and nobody has made a weakness chart for it. Hell, I was digging through GameFAQs the other day, and I realized that most people don't even know how most of the stats in the game work. And really, I can't say I blame them, considering the fact that even the manual doesn't give you all that much information to go on. But since we're now firmly in the realm of Theorycraft, what else could we do to balance out the various Robot Masters? Well, since apparently I'm the only one who thought about it, here would be my ideal patch for Mega Man Soccer. Woodman would see an increase in his defense power from 208 to 224. This would make him a little bit better at what he's already good at, which is defense and tackling. Airman's defense would be increased from 96 to 160. At the moment, Cutman is better in every capacity. Increasing his defense like this would make him harder to steal from and give him a unique role on the field. He'd be honest-to-God competition for both Needleman and Dustman, both of whom are a bit slower. Dustman's tackling would be improved to 112 from 96, and his defense to 208 from 176. Doing this would make Dustman a much more viable defensive player since he'd be able to get the ball further downfield, but he's not the best at tackling. He'd still have his 64 kick power, which is kind of a unique selling point. Needleman would have both his tackle and his defense increased to 148. This makes him a little bit more of a rounder. Topman would be increased to 46 speed. Flashman would have 128 tackle as opposed to 96. Toadman would have 64 kick. I guess I'd have to mill over the rest. The idea would really be to give everybody their own unique role on the field and make each one desirable for their own reasons. I remember the multiplayer team I developed to fight against Neil was focused around Skullman. If I remember correctly, it also used Pharaohman, Elecman, Flashman, and Anchor. One of this game's biggest tragedies is that Flashman actually has ironically one of the best color schemes in the entire game. It's like this blue and gold color. It looks great, seriously. Idly, if you want to know how to choose your color scheme in multiplayer, just make sure that whatever robot master that you want the color scheme of is your goalkeeper when you're first setting up your team. Huh, lucked out there. See what an increase in difficulty this is just because of how much faster he is? I've only scored 3 points so far. That's unheard of. Actually, that does remind me of something that happened the very first time I beat this game when I was little. I had faced Wily a couple of times, and he had kicked my ass every single time. Finally, after hours of false starts, I finally went the distance and managed to score 2 goals against him and then go 2-2. If a match ends in a tie, you go to a series of kickoffs. I luck out, pull ahead by 3 points. Suddenly end up back at the title screen with no explanation. I thought there was something wrong. I didn't know what was going on. So I tried again. And after significant difficulty, I managed to beat him 3-1. This time, however, I recorded it on video cassette. And once again, I wound up dumped back to the title screen. I actually showed my footage to the guy at the video store later, and he actually gave me a free rental because he thought the game was defective. He wasn't wrong! What neither one of us had any way of knowing was that every copy of the game is like that, because the ending wasn't properly programmed in. Oh, it's there, you just can't access it. Wait, what the hell is even going on? Skullman, what the hell are you doing? Elecman? You alright there, buddy? You alright there? Or just a little bit shell-shocked by Skullman? Oh, there you go. This is what I meant when I said earlier that the AI may call to mind Mario Retardy. For the uninitiated, Mario Retardy is a glorious little event where you take the Mario Party game of your choice and set it up with nothing but computer-controlled characters at the absolute lowest difficulty setting. The result? Comic gold. Basically, the absolute easiest AI in the entire game is designed with no awareness of how to effectively do anything. It will continually self-sabotage, it will screw up, and it will make the worst possible decisions at the worst possible times. All of which makes the game descend into outright pandemonium that's actually really interesting to watch. It's like an electronic version of Monty Python's Twit Olympics. While usually the AI in Megaman Soccer isn't quite that bad, I have seen it screw up passes, and I have seen it accidentally score points against itself. More commonly, it gets stuck in AI loops and then just doesn't know what the hell to do for several seconds. More often than that, you'll see it pass to you by accident, which I think may actually be a control scheme issue, considering the fact that you will do it just as oftenly to them. This game is filled with weirdnesses. You know who was the most commonly seen robot master in the Mega Man Ruby Spears cartoon outside of Gutsman and Cutman? It was actually Elecman. Close second was Bombman, followed by Iceman. To the best of my knowledge, Fireman only appeared in one episode. God, why do I know so much about that show? I don't even own it on DVD or anything. I just seem to have this command of thoroughly useless information. Maybe it's because I spent a while making so many memes out of the goddamn show. But can I really help it if every time I pause the thing, there's a perfect reaction image? Seriously, I can find like 8 in each episode. Minimum. You see a pose of Wily pointing at the camera. I see Dr. Albert Wily demands an explanation for this. You see an image of Proto Man looking at Mega Man and preparing to launch an attack from behind. I see Proto Man pondering sexual assault. I am terribly immature when it comes to this kind of idiocy. That does appear to be a trait that I share with many of my friends, however, so I'm in good company. Recently, I've been playing Smash Ultimate courtesy of my friends crowdfunding me a Switch. One of the more interesting traits of it is that during the World of Light campaign, the various spirits you run into as enemies are altered versions of regular characters that are designed to mimic another character entirely. By doing this, they basically ad hoc additional characters into the game. For example, the encounter with Sigma is a Ganondorf that permanently has a beam saber equipped. Snake Man was my personal favorite maximum stretch, as it was Snake, only he constantly uses low attacks. I find it to be a very clever, if somewhat insane way to handle that mechanic. It does like to throw random difficulty spikes at you, but I found that I was able to circumvent that problem by being just as much of a prick in return. Basically, I proceeded to use a strategy I invented called Expand Kong. A lucky random drop that I got gave me a Nipper plant, which I proceeded to level up and then transform into a PD Piranha. PD Piranha on his own is a relatively decent 3-star that gives you around 9,000 power base. Better than that, however, it also starts you off giant. Pair with Donkey Kong, win at everything forever, until you unlock Bowser, and then do it more. Anyway, with this, we've managed to successfully clear our 4th stage. Stage 5 will be going after Needleman, and hopefully I'll be getting that done later on in the week. Thank you for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you next episode.